Greetings. Hello. How are you doing? My name is Tom.
Hello. I'm Stephanie.
And this is English Digest, and we're talking about life in today's lesson. It's our all-English unit for the month of May, and we're talking about trying to stay safe in big crowds. Sometimes, of course, if you get in a crowd, it can get a little crowded. A lot of people are in a crowd, so it could be quite dangerous, especially in light of what happened in Korea last year.
Yeah, I've never been in a really crowded place except for once, I think, in my life. It was in France. I was on one of their trains, and it was kind of like their Independence Day, like our 4th of July in America. And wow, I learned never to get into a crowded train again. There was a little girl that couldn't breathe, and she started to cry, and people were getting panicky, and there were lots of elbows, and it was a little scary. So if you can't breathe and there's just no room to move, a lot of people will start panicking. That's the worst thing to do, of course. And then as the panic escalates, people get crushed. Some actually die because they can't get enough air. So we're going to read about this and then talk about some life-saving tips if you ever get into a very crowded situation.
A horrifying tragedy unfolded last Halloween when around 100,000 young people filled the narrow streets of Itaewon, a popular nightlife district in Seoul, South Korea. People became trapped in the confined space of the street. Some were crushed against walls. Others were trampled by the panicking mob. Unable to breathe, over 150 people died, and over 100 more were injured. Unfortunately, crowd crushes like this do happen. So how can you recognize when a crowded situation is becoming dangerous, and what can you do in this scenario? Crowds can be measured in terms of density, that is, the number of people per square meter. When that number reaches 6, then crowds become a hazard. It's hard to assess this, though, so it's better to pay attention to physical signs. If you're not in physical contact with anyone, or only bump into one or two others, then the situation is reasonably safe. However, if you can't move your hands freely, you could be in danger. It's at this point that people are forced to move, and the crowd has become impossible to control. If you're unfortunate enough to be in this predicament, there are several things you can do. First, if the crowd is moving, move with it rather than against it. Stay calm, move quickly but without shoving, and try to get to where the crowd is thinnest. Second, stay away from walls, pillars, and other solid structures, as you could be crushed against them. In addition, it's recommended that you fold your arms in front of you to protect your chest. Finally, fight the urge to scream for help and save your oxygen. If you do fall, adopt the fetal position. Lay on your side and put your arms over your face and chest. Curve your back and tuck your head down. Bend your knees and draw your legs up. Remain rigid until the danger has passed. One last thing to remember is that a crowd is more likely to stay safe if everyone works together. If you can help others without endangering yourself, do so, and you may become someone's hero.
Okay, folks, we're going to learn some safety tips today. This is a pretty useful unit. We'll find ourselves in different situations during our lifetimes, and this is a situation that no one wants to be caught up in, but sometimes it happens. So we're going to prepare in advance and give you some life-saving tips if you should be caught up in a big crowd. I know with some of the holidays, people like to go and enjoy the holiday outside at some event. For example, New Year's Eve, a lot of people are outside, and some of these events get kind of crowded, you could say, and you could get crushed. So we're going to talk about some life-saving tips, some advice. So we're going to start by talking about a news story that happened last year that was pretty horrific, and also it was right here in our own neighborhood here in Asia. It happened in Korea.
Right, so we got some life-saving tips or some information that may save your life someday. And let's begin by looking at the first paragraph here. It says, a horrifying tragedy unfolded last Halloween when around 100,000 young people filled the narrow streets of Itaewon, a popular nightlife district in Seoul, South Korea. So if something's horrifying, it's very scared. It's very scary, I should say. Yeah. It's very tragic. And it's really terrible. It's got lots of horror in it. So, of course, this is a bad situation that can cause death and injury. So that, of course, would be quite frightening, scary, or horrifying.
Horrifying. We use that word horrifying when something is really shocking, terrifying, truly awful. There are horror films or horror movies where usually there's a killer or several killers. It depends on what the horror film is about. But usually you're watching some pretty grotesque murders, horrible things to look at. Well, it's pretty horrifying when you see something like this unfold. Unfold, sometimes we use it to talk about actually folding, for example, our clothes and putting them into our drawers or into our closets. You can fold things like that. You can fold a piece of paper. But here we're using it as more of a figurative sense. To unfold here means it just develops little by little. So maybe a tragedy unfolds as some things combined. Maybe a tragedy unfolds as maybe there's a family outside and they're walking along the street, but there's a car that runs a red light. That's part of the tragedy. He doesn't see these people trying to cross the street and hits them, and the people die. The tragedy unfolds as all these actions take place. So there's usually a series of events, or if you're telling a story, there are a series of parts of the story that are revealed little by little. That's unfolding.
Yep, how it will happen over time. And again, this happened last Halloween. Halloween, of course, is the end of October.
Right.
And a lot of people there were in Itaewon in Seoul, South Korea. It's a popular nightlife district in Seoul, South Korea. Now, I don't know about Kaohsiung or Taichung or other cities in Taiwan, but I know a popular nightlife district here in Taipei is Ximending. And lots of people crowd into Ximending to have fun. And that might happen there. I've never heard of big crowds being down there. Of course, it's always crowded when I go down there, but we don't have those big crushing crowds like we do near 101 on New Year's Eve when everybody wants to go there to watch the fireworks. So, of course, you've got different areas of a city, and we've got the word district here. I don't know if that's the actual name of the official districts in Seoul, but of course here in Taiwan, the cities have different districts. So now all the cities have different districts. Like Taichung used to be Taichung-Xian, but now it's Taichung-Shi with all these different chu, and those chu are districts. Okay, like Dajia district, or here in the north we got Danshui district. We've got Beito district. All those are political divisions.
Yeah, and you can also talk about certain types of areas, for example, shopping areas as a district. I remember in New York City, we'd have the clothing district. There were a couple of streets in particular you could walk down, and you could buy all the fabric and things you need to construct a dress or a suit. There's a perfume district. It was on a different area. It was in a different area of the city, but we would just call those particular shopping areas districts. So sometimes we'll use district that way as well. 101 is a very popular shopping district for people who come to Taiwan and who are looking for very upscale goods. Well, this is a popular nightlife district, so you probably gathered together a lot of young people who wanted to go to nightclubs, dance, drink, hang out with their friends, and it usually attracted a lot of people. But when you have a holiday combined with a popular area, you're probably going to have even more people.
And I thought this was kind of surprising that it happened on Halloween. That's typically a Western holiday, although it can be celebrated in different parts of the world. At least here in Taiwan, people do have decorations for Halloween, but they don't really go out in big crowds for celebrations for Halloween. But I guess they do that in Korea. And yes, it's kind of crowded there. It's kind of densely populated. So in this district, it was quite confined, which means narrow. It's not very wide. We've got buildings really close to each other. And so they were trapped in this confined space of the street. And some were crushed against walls. So that can happen if you've got big crowds. If you're crushed by something, there's a lot of weight on you, and then it gives way, and you suffer injuries, and you die. But, of course, lots of things can be crushed, like crushed peanuts, for example. If you order some kind of beverage or maybe some kind of ice, for example, if they take something hard and pound it down into smaller parts, we can say that's crushed ice, for example.
Yeah, there are larger pieces of ice. Those are called ice cubes. But the crushed ice is smaller. Usually you get crushed ice and drinks at restaurants that they serve you rather than ice cubes. You can also have a crush on someone, which means you kind of like somebody, you're interested in them. Maybe you're not actually dating, but you kind of check each other out. You can have a crush on a teacher. A lot of young kids, when they're in elementary school, often get crushes on their teachers who are much older than they are. But we use crushed a lot. Here, of course, as Tom said, there's a lot of pressure being placed on something or somebody. I think some of these deaths happen because they just couldn't get any air in their lungs. To be crushed against walls just sounds awful. So others were trampled by the panicking mob. To be trampled means people are actually walking on top of you. So some people actually, if there's a big crowd, they get knocked down to the ground and they can't get back up. And other people are so desperate to get out of the area that they just walk on top of these people. And of course, they can't survive that way either.
Right, so they were trampled, they were crushed, and maybe some of them suffocated, which means you can't get enough air and you die because of that. And unable to breathe, over 150 people died and over 100 more were injured. That's quite a shocking number there.
Yeah.
150 people were killed that way. I've heard of similar situations where, maybe 10 or so people were killed, like during a concert way back in the 70s in Cincinnati when The Who gave a concert there. There was no crowd control, so about 10. I don't remember the exact number.
Wow.
Quite a few people died there, but not nearly as many as 150. And then, of course, we've got 100 who were injured, who survived, but they were hurt.
It's amazing. That's a really large number, especially for such a developed country. You know, South Korea is very well developed, so it's shocking to see these numbers. Unfortunately, it says the crowd crushes like this do happen. So we're calling it a crowd crush. I actually haven't heard this term before, but it makes sense that you'd call something like this a crowd crush. We talked about what crush means as a noun. It's being used as a noun here, but it's also used more frequently as a verb to crush something or to have a crush on someone. That's a noun. So how can you recognize when a crowded situation is becoming dangerous, and what can you do in this scenario? There are certain events, and Tom mentioned one, a popular concert where you go and listen to a singer, it could be a rapper, a rock star, it doesn't matter. But those who are near the stage, people want to get as close as they can to that artist performing. And people are usually standing by the stage's tip, the stage's edge. They're not really sitting down there, they're standing. So it's easy to get crushed there.
Right, but considering how many concerts and celebrations take place all over the world, it's surprising that this doesn't happen more often.
Yeah.
Indeed. Okay, that brings us to the midway point in our discussion for today. Let's take a break now, but please stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, guys. We're continuing to talk about staying safe in crowd crushes, where a lot of people get jammed in together into a very confined space. There's not a lot of free space. And unfortunately, when people get panicked, or maybe they hear a gunshot, or someone says knife or whatever, maybe they're afraid someone's going to be killing them, then they'll start running, panicking, and they'll walk over people, they'll crush people, they don't care. They just want to get out of there. And sadly, a lot of people are so afraid they don't think of people around them very often. They get selfish.
Okay, so again, crowds can be measured in terms of density. That is the number of people per square meter. So that's what density means, how much stuff you can fit into a certain space. And the adjective is dense, and the adverb is densely. So we could say that Yonghe, here in the north of Taiwan, is one of the most densely populated places in the world.
Oh, is it?
Or Taipei itself is quite densely populated. The population is quite dense, which means there are a lot of people crammed into a small space. And when the number reaches 6 within a square meter, these crowds will become a hazard. So that's the technical definition. If there are 6 people inside a square meter, that's highly dense. That's a high density. And, of course, nobody's really counting that when they're in that kind of situation.
No.
Gee, how many people are around me? And where's my yardstick? I need to measure this. But, of course, it's hard to assess this. It's hard to figure this out, though. So it's better to pay attention to physical signs. That means just indications around you that it's quite crowded. And if you're not in physical contact with anyone or only bump into one or two others, then the situation is reasonably safe. Now, again, I've been in very crowded situations where, yeah, you do bump into other people here and there, but you're not totally trapped within them. Let's see, last February, was it? There was the Lantern Festival here in Taipei, and at the Sun Yat-sen Hall there, a bunch of people crowded in there on a Saturday night, and it felt like it could be a big crowd like that, but it wasn't that bad. I mean, it was bad. It was quite crowded there, but not having all these people crowding against you and making you lose your breath.
Yeah, so if you can't move your hands freely, you could be in danger. So that's one of the signs to look out for, bumping into somebody. If you can't move your hands freely, it's at this point that people are forced, that if they're forced to move and the crowd, all starts moving at once, it could become impossible to control. Most of the time when people have problems in crowds and they're crushed or trampled upon, it's because there's some other danger that people are aware of or think there's a danger that they need to escape from. For example, there might be a bombing. When a bomb goes off, you see everybody just run. Or they think they hear a shot, could be a car backfiring, which sounds like a gun going off to me. They'll start running as well. So you need to be paying attention all the times to your physical surroundings, just so that you'll know how to react. Sometimes I look around for exits. I want to know the best place to get out of a place quickly in case I need to. So these are some signs that the area you are in might become a hazard. A hazard's just a place where there's danger or risk.
Exactly. So it's at this point, of course, that people are forced to move, and you can't really move independently. You kind of have to move with the crowd, and that crowd becomes impossible to control. And here in the next paragraph, it says, if you're unfortunate enough to be in this predicament, there are several things you can do. A predicament, of course, is a difficult situation, like if you're a DJ at a radio station and you need to do some announcing and suddenly you need to use the restroom where, well, you're in kind of a predicament. What am I going to do? I need to talk on the radio here, but at the same time, I need to, go to the bathroom. So, gee, what am I going to do? Am I going to pee my pants or something?
Yeah, so a predicament, just so you know, it could be embarrassing. The situation Tom's describing is kind of embarrassing. It could be unpleasant. It could be difficult. It could be all of those things. I'm in a predicament. Seems like when we were growing up, Tom, there was some sort of cartoon that they would use that word a lot, predicament.
Sounds familiar.
So as a little kid, I knew predicament was bad. That's how we learn English. Any language as we're growing up. You listen to the context or the situation where they use the words. And I remember as a little girl thinking, predicament's not a good thing. So, you need to be aware of the surroundings. You might be unfortunate enough to be in a crushed crowd or in this type of predicament. So what do? First, if the crowd is moving, you move with it rather than against it. Never go against the tide. Remember, it's like swimming in the ocean. If you swim against the waves or the tide, you're never going to make it to the shore. So it gets to be difficult. So move with the crowd, not against it.
And stay calm, be relaxed, and move quickly but without shoving, and try to get to where the crowd is thinnest. So if you shove, that means you push somebody or something quite violently or quite quickly. Hey, quit shoving! Sometimes people do this if they're waiting in line and they're anxious to get on the bus or something like that. They might start shoving.
Oh, that's true.
Which can be quite rude to do. So that's the first thing you should do. Don't shove other people. Stay calm. And second, stay away from walls, pillars, and other solid structures, as you could be crushed against them. We all know what a wall is, but a pillar is just something hard that is standing straight up. It could be a pole. It could be something that is supporting a building. So stay away from those kinds of structures because you might get crushed against them, and it could be your doom.
Ooh, it could be the end of you. You might hear young people saying kind of a rude way, shove it or shove off. Just kind of means get lost, get out of here. It's rude. It's not as rude as using the F word, but you will hear people say that.
The F word, you mean fart?
No, but you know what I'm talking about. We don't say those words. Yeah. So, to shove. You see a lot of shoving when people are in line. You see a lot of shoving in Japan when they're trying to get on the trains at rush hour. Yeah. They have people employed to shove the people in so that the doors can close. That's a really good word to use. We actually use it quite a bit. So push, shove is a really good word, though, if people are using a lot of force to move somebody's body.
Right, so move with the crowd and then try to get to an area where there aren't so many people, where the crowd is thinnest. And second, stay away again from those walls and pillars. You might get crushed against them. And in addition, it's recommended that you fold your arms in front of you to protect your chest. So that's what we recommend. It's recommended.
Right.
Somebody made this recommendation somewhere, some official, some expert or something. So it's recommended, or someone has recommended, that you fold your arms in front of you. Like you're waiting. A lot of people fold their arms in front of them because they're getting impatient. Boy, this is taking forever. Boy, I wish we could get this done quick. So fold your arms in front of you, and that will help you protect your chest. It will protect your chest from getting crushed. And finally, fight the urge to scream for help and save your oxygen. Oxygen, of course, is what we need to breathe. I don't remember the percentage, but the Earth's atmosphere is, 70% nitrogen, and the rest is oxygen with some trace elements. So again, we all need oxygen to breathe. The number or the symbol for it is just the letter O.
Right, so that's all important. Moving on to the final paragraph, if you do fall and you're pushed to the ground or shoved to the ground, or you just trip and fall, the advice is to adopt the fetal position. Fetal is the term we use for a baby before it's born. So if you look at some of the pictures of babies in a mama's womb, they're curled around their bodies, right? So that's kind of the position that they're asking you to adopt. So you're going to curve your back. This is a description. Curve your back, tuck your head down, and then bend your knees and draw your legs up. So you really are going to look just like a little baby before it's born. That way it protects your head, it protects your heart and chest area, and you're supposed to remain as rigid or stiff as possible. To curve, usually we use curve to talk about a shape, right? And we use it as a noun. But you can also curve, flatten the curve, we were told. if we wanted to flatten the curve of COVID, we would stay inside. That was a lie. That didn't work. But you can also throw a curve if you're a baseball pitcher, where he puts his hands in a particular position on the baseball, and it forces the ball to move a little bit as he throws it to home plate. So curve, if you curve your hand, you can make different shapes. If you're doing sign language, for example, you're speaking in sign language, you'll often curve your hands and fingers. This means just to curve your back. What does tucking mean, Tom?
To tuck, of course, means to move your body in on itself, bring your knees to your chest, and bend your head down. So that's what to tuck means, basically to move something into a tighter position. Sometimes we talk about our mothers tucking us in at night. They will help us get into bed, and they'll cover us with the covers so that we're nice and warm and comfortable, and we can get a good night's sleep.
Or you tuck your shirt into your pants, the waistband of your pants. We use it that way too.
Right, so yes, indeed, you want to tuck yourself in, tuck your head down, and bend your knees and draw your legs up. Okay, so this, of course, is when you're lying on your side on the ground here. And you remain rigid until the danger has passed. If something's rigid, it is stiff, it doesn't move, you're unable to bend, and you won't lose shape. So again, you want to be really stiff there, and you just wait until all those people have gone away. Then you can stand up and get a breath of fresh air.
So one last thing to remember is that a crowd is more likely to stay safe if everyone works together. The problem is that in times of emergency, it seems like everyone is out for himself or herself. They're only thinking of their own survival. There's that great need all people, all human beings have is to live. No one wants to die. But if you can work together as a large group, the chances are better that everyone will come out of it okay and safe. Sadly, what happened in Korea was that people weren't working together, and they pretty much went against all of these recommendations, these tips. Maybe they didn't know how to save themselves, but it's always good to prepare in advance for natural disasters or events like this so that you'll know what to do. When you're frightened, it's very hard to think clearly, but if you've thought about it in advance and you've practiced, you have a better chance of living.
Right, so don't panic and don't cry out for help. You'll waste oxygen that way. And yes, of course, you want to help others in this situation. If you can help others without endangering yourself, well, do so.
Yeah.
And you may become someone's hero after the disaster has passed, and they can say, oh, you saved my life. We'd like you to be on YouTube or something like that. Okay, that brings us to the end of our discussion for today, and it brings us to the end of our program for today. So thanks for joining us, and make sure you join us again next time. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.